Hello, I'm Sharon Ferris, Director of Marketing at CEREC. Welcome to today's webinar. We are delighted to have Lisa Taylor, founder and president of Challenge Factory, with us today. Lisa will be sharing her research and insights on CEREC's newly published book, Retain and Gain, Career Management for Nonprofits and Charities. But before Lisa starts, I would like to take just a few moments to introduce you to CEREC for anyone who may be unfamiliar with us. CEREC is a charitable organization that focuses on education and research in career counseling and career development in Canada. We fund research that advances knowledge in the field, like the research that you're going to hear about today. And bringing you learning opportunities like this webinar is also a key part of our mandate. CEREC has three main programs: the Connexus National Career Development Conference, which is held in Ottawa each January. We also have our contactpoint.ca website, which is a free online community for career development professionals, which is also undergoing an evolution, and the Canadian Journal of Career Development, which is also free to access online. And you can learn more about all of CEREC's work at cerec.ca. Now, a couple of quick housekeeping points. If during today's webinar you have any questions, please enter them at any time in the box that you see on your screen, and Lisa will address them when she can during the session, and then certainly we'll save some time at the end of the webinar for those questions. And then once the webinar is complete, we will email you the slides as well as a recording of the session. If you are on social media, we encourage you to engage using these popular Twitter hashtags that you see on your screen. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our presenter. Lisa is, as I mentioned, founder and president of Challenge Factory and the Center for Career Innovation. Her workforce and workplace perspectives have been featured in media outlets across North America. Lisa speaks regularly on the future of work, the intergenerational workforce, and the changing nature of careers in today's economy. Over to you, Lisa.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Sharon, and it's a real pleasure to be with everyone today. I'm looking forward to a great session, and I hope for quite a bit of interaction. So feel free to put in your comments, your questions, and we'll jump right in. So today I'm really pleased to be presenting on No Time, No Budget, No Problem, an introduction to Retain and Gain, which is one of the newest publications that CEREC has put out. That I was really honored to be the researcher for and the author of. It's Retain and Gain is focused on helping organizations that typically wouldn't necessarily think about career management or have the internal resources to be able to implement broad, sweeping career programs into their environment. So the first book in the series, Retain and Gain, Career Management for Small Business, looked at the small and medium-sized business market, companies that have fewer than 500 employees across Canada. And when that book launched, there was immediately a request from the nonprofit and charitable sector to say that they wanted a resource that was applicable for that sector with the unique challenges that you have as leaders within that sector to retain your staff and to gain new employees, as well as to gain increasing levels of engagement in today's complex world of work. So that is the background and the foundation for the publication that we're now going to spend about 45 minutes working with and talking a little bit about. One step, just to give you a little bit of background about Challenge Factory, and thank you to Sharon for that very kind introduction about my background. Challenge Factory is a pretty unique organization in Canada in that we take a unique view of looking at the future of work in all of its different dimensions. So how is the world of work shifting and changing between now and 2030? We do that with three different lenses. We do research, which gives us the ability to have some foresight into what's going to be coming. We do consulting with organizations of all sizes across the country, which gives us an opportunity to share some insight and make it applicable inside of each individual organization. And we do training, where we really take everything that we've learned and put it into action in unique and experiential programs inside of our client organizations. So that's how Challenge Factory, and that's how I think about questions related to the future of work. And I think that you'll see the foresight, insight, and action levels of Zoom operating in the publication that we're talking about today, in Retain and Gain, and in the discussion as well. So when we talk about being a futurist or focused on the future of work, lots of people always indicate to me that they're interested in how we predict the future. What is it that goes into predicting the future, and how we will know what the future of work will look like in 2030? And I really think that there's two different ways that we can be approaching what's happening within our workforce today. I want to take career management and retaining staff, engaging them, and put it into a broader context of what's taking place within the world of work. The world of work is undergoing enormous change. We know this. There's transformation and changes in the way that the workforce is behaving, in the way that workplaces are behaving, and there's a tendency to want to get to the data that'll give us the information so that we can set out the 3-step plan or the 10-step plan that'll move us from where we are now to where we want to be in a way that's really predictable. Businesses, organizations, institutions, donors, they really like predictability. And one of the things that I'm going to encourage us all to think about is to stop focusing so much on what's the prediction for the future. What does someone else say is about to happen to us, and what do we need to be ready to respond to if that's the prediction? And turn that on its head a little bit. And instead of waiting for someone else to predict the future for us, or to give us information that then we need to respond to really think about how are we shaping the future? What's our role as leaders, as employees, as contractors, as parents? What's our role as educators in shaping the future that we then want to be in? And that difference, someone else predicting the future and giving us information that we need to respond to, versus us taking agency and being actors in shaping our own future of work, makes all the difference in how we're then able to approach relationships that we have with our staff, with ourselves for our own career, with any of the stakeholders that we may be engaging in. So that's a concept I'd like you to just think about and keep in the back of your mind as we move through this webinar. Challenge Factory knows from our research that there are 5 drivers that are currently shaping the future of work. On the human side, looking at what's happening with workforces, the most immediate driver that's impacting us today is demographics and demographic change. That includes the aging workforce, hidden talent pools, the way that demographics is shaping and changing how work is being done, and what we think about over the entire life course of our careers. On the technology side, there's an awful lot of attention that gets paid to AI and robotics. And we'll include machine learning in that category, any kind of automation. I'm spending the day with the insurance sector this week. We're going to be talking about blockchain, all those technologies you can put into the bucket of that driver, AI and robotics. That's our catch-all for how technology is shaping the future of work. And then in between demographic change, very humanity-focused change that's taking place, and technology-driven change, AI and robotics, are the 3 drivers that fit in the middle. Career ownership as really one of the most significant. Currently today, we're experiencing changes in the relationship between employer and employee. And fundamental to this driver that's shaping the future of work is this question of who owns career, who's responsible for our own work and the way that it relates to broader organizations. What do organizations need to take ownership of and help us navigate as we need to change skills, expand the way that we look at what we do, react to the way that technology is impacting the work that we do? Who's responsible for that? And what's the relationship between that manager and frontline employee as we navigate through these changes? The other 2 drivers also take a lens at what's changing, and that is the rise of platforms, new business models, things like Uber, Airbnb, Amazon, Alibaba, all of these types of platforms that allow us to engage differently, where it's no longer about providing a product or a service, being engaged directly with your donors and your constituents, but instead providing a platform for lots of donors and constituents, client groups and employee groups to be able to interact together, and the freelance economy, the impact that precarious employment, the gig economy, and all of the structures that are shifting and changing as technology allows us to work differently. How is that shaping the future of work? I present these 5 and they become a cornerstone for a lot of the work that we do, because often when we talk about the future of work, there are so many topics swirling around that all get put together like a big ball of twine, that if you start to pull on all the different directions at the same time, it just creates this big knot that gets tighter and tighter and tighter, and you never actually get to good, easy ways to be able to start to take steps. And certainly with Retain and Gain, what the intention was to really focus in on that topic of career ownership and looking at that relationship of manager to employee, even in all of the context of what's happening today with tight timelines, limited budgets, limited career education in some cases, or HR training in some cases. And how can we provide something that's really practical that pulls that thread so that that knot doesn't stay as a great big knot that feels insurmountable, but actually becomes something that we can start to take action on. So let's jump right into it, and let's get into some of the messiness of the knot. So true or false, we're about to pull up a poll question for you. And actually, Yi, if you want to go ahead, I'll read the question. Older workers are the reason younger workers struggle to get jobs. True or false? If you want to go in and weigh in, we'll leave it open for about 10 seconds. Another 5 seconds. You let me know when you think the majority have answered.
So it's Sharon back to share the results with you, and quite a difference, quite a gap. True 12%, false 88%.
Okay, so most of you indicated that it is false, that older workers staying in the workplace longer are the reason that younger workers are struggling to find work, and that you are absolutely right. There are multiple things that are taking place within our workplaces today, within our workforces today. Some of them have to do with youth unemployment. Some of them have to do with growing into our own longevity. They're often put together, and they're 2 separate issues. And so in Retain and Gain, you will find a special section that actually deals with career management for recent graduates and new hires, as well as a special section that decodes a little bit what is happening with the aging workforce, with succession management and retirements, and how can you offer good career steps for your intergenerational workforce, as opposed to pitting your generations against each other and seeing only limited resources. Wonderful. So why don't we move to the next poll. So the next poll is another true or false. More Canadians are working in the gig or freelance economy today than ever before. True or false? I'll give you about another 5 seconds. And then Sharon, when you're ready, when you think that we have good participation, let us know.
Quite a gap here. 100% say true, 0 say false.
Okay, so that's great, and thank you for your participation. You're watching me just navigate to move us back to being able to see the slides. Okay, so thank you for that, Sharon. So wow, 100%, that's almost never happened to me on a webinar before. And I will tell you that the most recent data that's coming out from Canadian sources, from American sources and from Western European economies is actually indicating that this may be false. And I know that feels so strange because everything that we hear and everything that we read is driving us towards a more and more increasing focus on the gig or freelance economy. But when we actually measure the detail and the data that's been gathered over time, in Canada, the number of people that are indicating that they are freelancers or in a contract relationship hasn't grown over the last 20 years. In fact, it shrunk in the last year by 0.6%. So very, very small amount. It's negligible. What most of the researchers are now indicating is that it's flat. And there's all kinds of analysis and discussion that's going on that says, well, how is it being measured and what questions are being asked and are they capturing the data in the right way? So those researchers are concerned about those questions as well and are digging into it. But what is really clear is that the information, the way that it's being gathered, and even in the follow-up interviews that they're doing in going deep into this topic, is that we are not shifting ourselves into a situation where within the next 2 to 3 years, 60% of our workforce will be in a freelance model. And there are lots of news reports and articles that talk all about 2022 or 2023 or 2025 as being the time when everyone will be in a freelance model. So there's a discrepancy that's taking place in both of these questions. You happen to have the information to know that the demographic changes and the different generations interacting with the world of work is not a zero-sum game, one generation staying in, the other one having difficulty entering. But most people, if they read the headlines, do see that type of story. Older workers staying in the workplace is causing trouble for younger workers to get jobs. The same way, if we just read the headlines, we would believe that we are absolutely about to become an almost completely freelance economy. And yet, the data says maybe not so. So let's go into a little bit more data that's specific to some of the research that was done with retain and gain, and then come back to this concept of what do we do when the data we're getting, the media reports we're getting, and even what our gut tells us is true, what do we do if we can't trust that? How do we still move forward in an uncertain future so we can be leaders in helping our people develop their careers and have really sustainable, successful workforces within our organizations? One of the things that came through loud and clear when we spoke with nonprofits and charities across the country as part of developing retain and gain is that everyone feels that they are stretched to the max. There is very limited time, there is very limited budget, things are having to be done on shoestrings that may have always been done on a shoestring, but now the shoestring is being pulled even tighter and it's starting to fray. And there's real concern over how do you take care of people in an environment where, for example, this was some of the feedback we got in an early focus group, development and training isn't part of what gets written into funding proposals. And so we need to stay focused on the work itself, on what it is that our charity and our nonprofit is here to deliver, but we can't find the time, the budget, or even just the mind space to be able to continue to develop our people, even at a moment when we know careers are changing, the workforce is changing, what we expect of managers is changing, and we need to be able to provide that type of advancement and development if we're going to continue to be a strong sector. So, a little bit of color commentary on just what that looked like. When we did some of the research, and you'll see in some of these slides, there's a contrast to the small and medium-sized business market. I think it's interesting to be able to compare nonprofits and charities to other small organizations that are dealing with similar types of challenges when it comes to career management, workforce management, human resources. You'll see that 88% of the nonprofit leaders and 50% of the small business executives told us that they feel unprepared or unable to provide career development opportunities for their employees. And you can think about why that might be. Why might they say they feel unprepared or unable? I bet you have some ideas of your own, And you may even fall into this 88% that feels unprepared or unable. I'm going to come back to that in a couple of minutes. Another statistic that we have from our research is that 71% of the nonprofit leaders and 39% of the small business executives said that the organizations simply don't have resources to support new leaders. So if we look at the nonprofit space in particular, the nonprofit and charitable sector in particular, 71% indicating that there's leaders that may get promoted into their position, but there aren't the tools or the toolkit, the ability in a formal way for them to actually gain support as a leader, and not just as someone who's really exceptional within the organization, who understands the organization's mission, who's really good at the work that they do in whichever capacity they're doing their work inside of that organization, whether that's as a fundraiser, whether that's on the administrative side, on the project side, on the outreach side, the customer service side. There aren't the tools in order to support new leaders. And yet, leadership development and succession planning is a top concern within the sector. And finally, we found within a particular role that's unique to the sector, 50% of Canadian development directors expect that they will be leaving their current job in 2 years or less. And there's all kinds of work and analysis that's been done, not just in these particular statistics areas, the research that I'm sharing with you now, but drilling deep into particular roles that are really a part of the work that some of the partners and knowledge champions that help to ensure retain and gain came into the world that they have on their site. And one of the things that is really great about the Retain and Gain publication is there's lots of visibility into the work that the Ontario Nonprofit Network is doing, into what some of the other knowledge champions are also doing, with links to their reports and their data to be able to help you. So if that's the reality, if that's some of the data and the statistics of what people are facing and what they believe to be true, and if we can't trust necessarily the headlines that are helping us to understand how is the world of work changing, how is our own career going to be impacted within the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Challenge Factory looks out to 2030. What do we do when we can't necessarily rely on the information that we're getting, or that the information that we're getting is leading us to conclude things are impossible, or the prediction for the future is dire, or that we don't have the resources that we need, and we don't have the resources to be able to get the resources that we need? What do we do when we have no time, no budget, and no plan in order to be able to navigate through the future of work? Well, no problem. One of the things we need to realize is that we need to use new tools to approach the way that we're addressing career management inside of organizations. And the really great thing about the need for new tools is most of them are actually pretty old tools. So what I've done within Retain and Gain is take a look at really sound, practiced career management activities and principles, draw on some of the experiences, expertise, methodology, and wealth of research that exists within CEREC. And Sharon did a great job introducing the organization up front. There are so many resources and tools available at cerec.ca for you to be able to access. Take that foundation work of what's been true within career management for such a long time and make it really practical and useful for you today, so that we can take these old tools, combine it with what's happening in the world of work today, with the reality based on the survey results and the research I just shared with you of how it feels to be a leader and a manager inside of the nonprofit and charitable sector, responsible for people's careers in a shifting time of work, and apply the tools in a way that'll make sense for you on the job. Career management, because of its wealth of experience, expertise, depth, and interventions, really can offer the tools that you need to not just react to what's happening in your workforce, but to shape the future of work that you want to create so that your agency, your organization your nonprofit, your charity, really becomes a leader based on how you organize and leverage all the strengths of what's going on within your workforce. So I'm going to ask if we can launch into our last poll question. And just as it's coming up on the screen, it's asking you to identify what prevents you from taking action in career management. What feels risky? We'll just give you about another 5 seconds to choose which risk you want to highlight, which item you feel feels most insecure. Sharon, when you're ready.
All right, so with our results by a long lead, the 67% is people will ask for things we can't give them, followed by I'm not sure how to have career conversations, 10%, and then tied at 8%, I don't know what to do if career conversations go wrong and I don't have time to talk about careers, but 67% for people will ask for things we can't give them.
Okay, so that is very much, thank you, Sharon. Thanks so much. And let me just get us back to sharing slides. Okay, so that is very much in line with 3 risks that really came through loud and clear in the research that guided how we structure the activities inside of Retain and Gain. And I'm going to just summarize those risks into 3 different buckets. And there is actually a blog article that was published by CEREC just last week that goes into more detail on each of these 3 risks with some tips for how to overcome them. So you can certainly find that, or you can put a request into the chat box that gets sent to you. We'd be happy to follow up with you on that. So the first risk, which is the one that Sharon, you indicated was overwhelming among this group, 67% saying that it's going to open Pandora's box. We're going to end up getting all kinds of requests about salary, about promotions in very flat organizations, about flexible work structures where we may not be able to accommodate, and just having the conversation opens a box that we can't close. And so it's easier to just not have the conversation. As you'll see in a couple of slides, not having the conversation is actually a recipe for disaster, because your employees want to have these conversations, and the items that are in those boxes are a part of what they're thinking about anyways. So let's give you some tools. Let's play with this old tool, new tool idea. Let's give you some new tools that are based on some really sound principles so that you don't feel like you're opening Pandora's box, but instead you're opening a conversation that between the 2 of you, you can both take agency, the manager and the employee, to then shape how are you going to create a future that is within what's possible within your environment. So some of these activities are specifically designed to address Pandora's box. The second risk that we heard loud and clear came through in the second 2 responses that you indicated, where one of them was at 10% and matched with the other one, and that is the imposter syndrome. That some managers said, I barely have control over my own career. How am I supposed to give guidance and advice to someone else about their career? So this imposter syndrome, that you don't have the skills, that you don't have the knowledge, the expertise, the tool, or the ability to have a good career conversation, or the fear that you'll have the conversation but it'll go off the rails, is something that we captured as imposter syndrome and really identified as something that was meaningful and important. And so our activities needed to help bolster not just your confidence, but give you the step-by-step resources you needed so that you did feel confident to step into this role, because you do legitimately have what you need to be able to have career conversations with your staff. And then the third risk that was clear was simply the time warp. There isn't enough time. People-related and career-related conversations take time. something that you think might take only a couple of seconds or minute just to provide some feedback can very easily turn into something that's deeply personal, and people are going to want to go deeper than you intended. And before you know it, your entire week is taken up with people-related conversations and your work isn't getting done. So understanding that that's a concern, we specifically looked at how can we time box how you're doing this, even in an environment where your employees are going to react personally, and hopefully in really positive ways that ends up saving you time, as opposed to drawing out long conversations because you've opened Pandora's box without the skills to be able to then close it up or be able to expand into something that's useful and meaningful. Altogether, these three risks were really behind what was a design principle in how Retain and Gain was created. So, with all of that said, let's turn to the actual publication itself. And I think it's important that we've gone through this background before we just launch into the book. I think it's important for it to be understood. I have a copy here with me, that it's something that you can use to engage not just in day-to-day career-related discussions, but it's part of, if you zoom out, part of really understanding how you can be interacting with how the world of work is changing, how you can start to take steps into shaping your own future of work, and how you can zoom right into working very closely with your individual staff. So, Retain and Gain, as I mentioned, is the second book in the series. The first book was really well received by the small and medium-sized business community, and it's designed with a very similar principle. It's designed to think about where is there examples of other things where there is an enormous amount of information that we need to be able to absorb. There's limited time, there's limited budget, we can't possibly do it all, and yet we want to have an exceptional experience because we are investing our time, our hearts, our energy, and we want to be able to take a great journey with the people that we're traveling with. So as you can probably tell through the language that I'm using, as well as the image that's on your screen, the analogy that was used to structure the entire book was that of travel. And the book itself is designed as if it's a travel journal. So if you were to pick up a travel guide, let's say it's a travel guide on France, the very first chapter in the guide would give you background and overview of what do you need to understand if you're going to go to France. What's the general context? What's the history, geography? What's the weather going to be like? What are some of the major landmarks that you need to know about? What's the background? And then once you've gotten that background, you're quickly jumped into itineraries. What are the activities that you could do or that's recommended for you if you had a day to spend in a city like Paris? And if you had 3 days, what activities would you want to add on to that itinerary? And if you had many days, how could you expand on the itinerary that's already been recommended to get a taste of France and really tour the country? That view of time, limiting what we're able to do, but still wanting to have a meaningful experience and get a real solid flavor of what it is that we're doing and experiencing and seeing, is what drives how Retain and Gain is organized itself. It's structured so that it has activities that will take you less than 10 minutes. But if you had an hour, you could do a couple of these other things. And if you had a couple of hours to plan for over the course of a quarter or 6 months or a year, here's how you could start to build a more robust career management plan. Starting at the beginning of the book with a really deep understanding of, foundationally, what is career management? What do managers who may never have heard that term before, what do they need to know? So that when they're doing the activities, they have a little bit of background. The same way when you're visiting a site, you have a little bit of understanding of what it's going to be like when you go to France in general before you narrow in onto the specific. So that's the travel journal perspective, and we've tried to make the tools as practical as possible. You can see here just a snapshot of one of the pages that really talks about, it's the beginning of the itinerary section that sets out some of the activities. I'm going to take you through 3 activities in just a minute. And in addition to just providing you with activities and resources and links and URLs to be able to go to, it also has 3 special identifiers all the way through. One is indicated by the little symbol that's there that says take action. Take action are things you can immediately do. Travel tips are things that just help guide you get deeper and deeper and more familiar with the world of career management. It helps address some of the concerns that we heard with the imposter syndrome. And then the did you know are details and facts, data and statistics from our research that helps address some of the Pandora's box, some of the unknown and what's going to happen if you open this box. Well, did you know that in reality, this is actually what's happening? This is why you want to have that conversation. So across the did you know, travel tips, and take action, we're able to slowly guide you to address the risks that are preventing you from taking up some of the activities that are listed in the pages in the first place. So jumping right into a did you know? Did you know that employees who get the opportunity to continually develop are twice as likely to say that they will spend their career with their current organization? This did you know ties back to one of the cautionary comments I made when we talked about Pandora's box and how often people feel it's too risky to open the box and so they don't want to have the conversation. What research shows us through Gallup, through other sources, is that having the conversation, even if it doesn't necessarily go the way the employee wants, or it doesn't result in the employee getting every single thing that's on their wish list, engaging them in the conversation and indicating an interest in helping them to develop will actually keep them engaged, will attract more people to your organization, and will retain your high performers. So the reason that that is true is because people don't necessarily only want more money or only want an increase in promotion. We're not one-dimensional. And the more we can show that we're interested in investing in our employees in their own development, that 5 years from now they will be better at what they do and more advanced in the sector, the more they're going to be loyal and want to stay inside of organizations. So the activities that are built into Retain and Gain help to continually advance and develop the staff that you have in the roles that they're in and in creative ways across your organization without relying on salary increases, on promotions, or on other things that are really extraordinarily challenging at different moments in time within the organization. So let's jump into 3 of the activities. This first one is on page 21. It's an example of a 10-minute activity, and it just gives you an idea of how complicated are these. How hard would this be for you to be able to do this afternoon with one of your staff members? Even with a team member, if you're in the leadership or a management level position, you don't need to go to having this just be with staff that report to you. Developing a career-focused culture means having career conversations across the board. So this 10-minute activity says take 10 minutes and recall one career-defining moment that was meaningful for you. Who were you with? Why was it meaningful? How did it tie to what your organization was trying to accomplish? And what did you learn from it? So in 10 minutes, you can spend some time just thinking about this one question. And when you write it into your own career story, it becomes information that you can then share. You can swap stories with a coworker and start to learn the patterns of what are career-defining moments. Was it that moment you got a salary increase? Because I bet you when you sit and think about it, it wasn't. So then what can you learn about what's been the most meaningful for you? And how can you help your staff have those same kinds of meaningful moments? What have you learned from it? And ask them to do the same. Ask them to come to their next one-on-one with you or set up a one-on-one just where you ask them to share with you what was their most career-defining moment. You having information on who they were working with, why did they find it meaningful, and what did they learn will give you great insight into what motivates them and what really gets them excited about continuing on their own career journey. That's the first activity. Let's move to a second. And because time is always so tight, I really did focus on another 10-minute activity. This is one that actually gets the most feedback when people have taken a look at what's within Retain and Gain. It gets the most feedback from both employees as well as managers as being intensely impactful. It's really straightforward and simple. If you manage a team of 10 people, make a list of the 10 people that you manage. And even if you manage a team of 2 people, make a list of the team of 2 people that you manage. Find time in your schedule within the next 3 weeks where you're going to call them with no agenda. You're going to call them. Sometimes you'll be in the same office and you can just talk with them directly. Sometimes you'll call them. In Toronto, it's very popular to have long commute times with not much going on while you're in the car. I used to call my staff and do this 10-minute check-in on morning commute times when they were on their way into the office if I knew that that wouldn't be something that they would see as being too intrusive. Call your staff and you open the call by saying, "Hi, it's Lisa. You and I haven't had a chance to just talk one-on-one in a long time. I'd love to just spend the next 10 minutes just having a no agenda call with you. I don't have anything I need to share with you. There's no information I need to convey with you. I don't need anything at this moment in time. I really just wanted to connect and catch up. What do you want to talk about?" And let them tell you what they want to talk about. And for some of them, it may be something that's happening with them personally. It may just be at a surface friendly level. Some of them may go into a project they're working on. Some of them may dive into an issue that they're struggling with. It opens the door to get to know them much more personally and develop a relationship with them beyond just the tactics of checking off a checklist of things that have to be done in the office. And if you hit into a topic, here's the Pandora's box aspect of this and the time warp aspect. If you hit into a topic that is clearly going to take longer than 10 minutes, you've set up with them from the beginning that you only are going to take 10 minutes at this moment, and you can say, "Thank you so much, I really appreciate it. I don't want to take up more than 10 minutes of your time right now, but what you raised is really important. Let's schedule a meeting where we can sit down together and address it." This 10-minute no agenda check-in now has let you know that there's an underlying issue that probably would have brewed for weeks, if not months, if you hadn't opened the door. So I encourage you to give that a try. Sometime this week, have a 10-minute no agenda check-in with someone that you work with. The last activity that I'll give you an example of that you can find in the book, it's on page 27, is a little bit deeper. It's listed as a 1-hour activity, so it takes a little more time. And it says, what are the career-related metrics or goals that you set for your staff? How are the metrics tied to organizational goals? And then on page 27, there's a bunch of additional questions that guide you through how do you actually answer this and get to a meaningful understanding of how are you setting out career goals, advancement, development goals for your staff to continually be learning, to continually be advancing in the skills that they have, to recognize where there may be a gap in a skill that they used to have, but now they don't in a new context. Maybe they've become a new leader, or they used to have another job, and now because of the role that they're in, there's skills that they need to develop. How can you actually use career-related metrics to give both of you an indication that there's something that needs to be done so that they can continue to develop, and that you're measuring it so that they can feel a sense of accomplishment and know that they're advancing? You can recognize that advancement in all kinds of ways, and that the way your staff continue to develop and advance are tied to the goals that your organization has. So as I say, there's more detail available for you waiting on page 27 for how you could take this 1-hour activity and actually turn it into something that, if you only did this, would create a whole bunch of new career-related focus in how you approach your work with your staff and how they approach working with you from a career perspective that builds and grows them as individuals as well as your organization. So those are the 3 activities that I wanted to walk you through. And what's critical as we take a look at the way the world of work is changing and the way that managers are interacting is relationships in the workforce are changing. The way that we work is changing. Whether you have work from home policies and remote workers or not, whether you have a really intergenerational workforce working with you or not, whether you have really sophisticated ways of developing your leaders and having career conversations, or you're just figuring it out as you go and everyone's creating it together, co-creating it together, we need to take the old learning and methodologies that come out of our discipline of career management and apply them to the new tools that integrate on the job so that you can be doing it as part of your everyday work as opposed to an added activity. You'll notice that there's no extraordinary templates. There's no, take 6 hours for a career management workshop. Everything is integrated into conversations you already are having, engagements you're already doing, planning you're already thinking about for the projects and the work that your organization is doing, and just adding a career lens to it so that by default, just going to work every day is continuing to advance the careers of the people that are working with you and for you, and your own career too. And that's really the point. The point is for us to move out of waiting for someone else to predict the future of work, stop waiting for someone else to say, here's how it's going to be, and instead recognize that the stage is ours. As members of the career development community, as nonprofit and charitable leaders, as managers, as employees, as educators, we actually are shaping our own future. And choosing to wait for someone else to tell us the skills to develop or to the action steps we need to take is in itself shaping us to be in a responding kind of mode, sitting back on our heels. The way we take center stage is by taking a deep breath, recognizing we can open that box. We do have the skills that we need. We can rely on good tools. And to be honest, with minimal time invested, we actually can be shaping our own future of work. So that's where I'd like to leave you. And I'd like to thank you for your attention. I would like to, in closing, as you're thinking about some of your questions and comments that you'd like to add, I would like to just highlight that Retain and Gain as a playbook is available to you at ceric.ca/nonprofit. It's downloadable for free in French and in English, and it is also available in print format, in ebook format. As I mentioned, there's blogs that are being written to highlight some of the key content that's within the book itself. So I really encourage you to go and have a good play with it. Jump into the activities that are there and really let me know which one is the one that really has made the most difference in the way that you approach it. A final thank you to the Knowledge Champions that really supported the book, of course, CERIC itself, and the Counseling Foundation of Canada. I'd also like to just mention that the Lawson Foundation, the Medard Foundation, Imagine Canada, and the Ontario Nonprofit Network were so instrumental in making this book come into the world and really in influencing and having a good, strong guiding hand in what the sector itself would really need so that it's specific and unique to you. So I'd like to thank you and maybe turn it over to any questions.
Hi, it's Sharon back. So, Lisa, we have a question from Michelle, who says that she appreciates your point about employees not being one-dimensional in terms of what they're looking for. But going back to that point around some concern that employees will ask for raises or promotions during those career conversations, do you have some specific tips you can share in how to respond to that?
Yeah, so it's difficult to give a general answer that it will be, kind of what's the catch-all phrase that just satisfies everybody across all organizations. at the heart of it, some of it is going to come based on the relationship you already have with your staff. So how much transparency do you already have with them about what the organization is doing and the financial models that the organization is operating under? Do you have regular check-ins just on how that employee is performing, performance management separate from kind of their aspirational, where they want to see their career going? How much openness and relationship do you already have with your employees? If you've been quite closed in terms of sharing information about the future financials of the organization, or even the way that the current financials work within the organization, as well as their own kind of performance and future, then that's really the starting point. You know, the starting point in those organizations is just to open the door and start to develop the kind of relationship so that there's some trust, so that when you have to get to more difficult conversations, it's based on a foundation of trust that they can hear the really good wisdom that you're going to share with them, that I'll give you in just a second. If you don't have that trust, if you aren't used to having those types of conversations, nothing you say will come across as being genuine. So building that foundation of trust is really important. And the 10-minute tips, the 10-minute activities I shared on this call are really good first steps before you jump into broader career conversations, so that you can start to build that kind of foundation. If you're in an organization that has that foundation and you're still concerned, as you know, as you should be, I think it's a reasonable and realistic concern that employees are going to want to talk about their compensation and where they're going when you open the door to career focused conversation. In those circumstances, I think there's an activity within the book that would be really helpful to be able to get you started as well, which takes a step back from compensation and looks at what motivates and drives each individual on your team. How important to each of the individuals on your team is financial compensation, as opposed to recognition in the industry, or the opportunity to learn something new, or the opportunity to be the front person representing your organization at an important event. Each of us is motivated by something that's different, and all of us need to be compensated fairly. There is a lot of work that's going on in the sector focused on decent work, and I think it's incredibly important. But that's not the only answer. And even in corporations that have rich and deep salary programs and bonus programs, managers still run into employees that aren't satisfied with what they're being compensated at. And that's because there's something else that drives that employee or that motivates that employee that's not being satisfied. So one of the activities, as I say, in Retain and Gain, gives you, I think it's a 1-hour activity, gives you some work that you can do to really understand what's going to make a difference to each individual unique person on your team, and how can you tailor your conversation so that even if today you can't satisfy their salary request, you can expand on the things that don't cost you money, but are incredibly valuable in that employee's currency, to be able to have them feel valued, recognized, continuing to develop, and your partner as you move forward. And then the last step, I would say, is just having open and honest conversation, to be able to explain when there is hardship, where that hardship is coming from, and when you're at the stage of trust with your staff, partnering with them, having them help you shape the future so that we can be building it all together, as opposed to feeling like you have to have all the answers on your own. Otherwise, they're not going to stay with you. They will stay with you when you engage them in helping to solve the problems that are keeping you up at night. And that's my last kind of tip for you. Thank you for the question. It's a good one and a tough one.
Just a comment from Liz. She said, this has been very helpful. Thank you. And next, a question from Shirley. And she writes, like in most nonprofit organizations, we have a flat structure with 15 staff with one COO and one ED. The COO also wears the HR hat in addition to funding and running the operations of the organization. He is not participating in this webinar because he doesn't have the time. How are employees in a flat structure to feel empowered to, quote unquote, tell their CEO or executive director to prioritize something like this?
So that is a really good question, and some of it can come top down for the leaders that are on this call, that you can now start to cascade these types of activities. And some of it for those of you that are on the call today and aren't in that leadership perspective, but you want it to bubble up, you can also take a look at some of the activities that are within the book and pick one or two that you want to do for your own career development, and then bring the results back to your leadership team. Some of the aspects of the book specifically identify things that can be measured. So you can pick the activities that tie specifically back to your organization becoming more successful. It tells you how you can make that tie to some of the metrics that are going to be important to your management team, so that just in advancing your own career and taking up some of these activities, you elevate your own ability to have those kinds of conversations that shows real return on investment for why they may want others in the organization to also take up some of these activities. And another activity that's in the book is the idea of having culture champions across the organization. That gives a bit of a recipe for how, in the day-to-day work of just doing your job, you can be reflective, you can develop relationships with people that are outside of your usual typical network, and you can bring that information back into your organization in a way that creates this culture of career championing across the entire organization. So when you download the book, I would take a look for how career champions can help. If you want to step into being one, you don't have to be a manager to be a career champion, as well as some of the other activities that just advances your own career under the measure category, so that you can make sure that you're bringing it back to them in a way that really hits hard in what does this organization need to be achieving? Look at how I'm helping to make that happen. What would happen if more people were approaching their careers like I have been, and how can I help you start to do this in a broader sense across the organization?
All right, we have time for one last question, Lisa. This one is from William, who starts by making a comment that he agrees with your comments on fair compensation. And he wants to know if you have any thoughts about the entry level within not-for-profit organizations and the seeming reliance on unpaid internships or volunteers as the starting point, especially for students. I know we do have a section of the playbook that looks at new recruits.
Yeah, so there's two special sections in the playbook, two or three actually, that look at that topic from different lenses. One is for new recruits. The other is looking at precarious employment practices and decent work within the sector. So there's a section there that looks at 7 aspects of decent work and how organizations need to be moving themselves to make sure they're addressing all 7 of those aspects if the sector is going to be a leader in demonstrating solid practices in employment. And then there's also a section that looks specifically with a gender lens at gender-based practices in careers within the sector, again from that view of how can we be leaders, how can the sector be leaders in good practice across different topics related to decent work and precarious employment. I would rely on the organizations that are listed inside of the book itself in terms of going deeper into some of the research and core findings. I would say that the nonprofit and charitable sector is not the only sector that has a significant reliance on volunteer labor and on internships and the way that students get integrated. The communications sector in the private sector also has this strong, 10 years of volunteering at a radio station kind of approach that is an interesting model for developing careers. And I think really in working together and looking across sectors at how other sectors have started to evolve into having more predictable and reliable and sustainable practices, I think that's where the real value is. And that's why with the limited time that's left, I'll just direct you to the resources that are listed in the playbook itself, because there are really good practical checklists and tools at the tactical level, as well as really deep research that's going on in the sector that I think is very valuable.
All right. And with that, Lisa, I will thank you for sharing your time with us today and giving us your insights from putting together the book and answering our questions. On your screen, you will find the URL to download a free copy of Retain and Gain, Career Management for Nonprofits and Charities. And there are also links if you prefer to purchase a hard copy or an ebook. And as mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we will email you a link to this recording along with a copy of the slides later today. And once we close down the webinar, a survey will pop up on your screen, and we ask if you could just take a few minutes to give us your feedback. And you will also see on your screen an upcoming webinar series around building your digital career brand that may be of interest to you. And with that, let me close by thanking you, the participants, for joining us on the webinar today, and we hope to see you at another learning opportunity very soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.